You're listening to a Mamma Mia podcast.
Mamma Mia acknowledges the traditional owners of land and waters that this podcast is recorded on. From Mamma Mia, I'm Mia Freedman. You're listening to No Filter, and I never dreamt of being part of a throuple when I grew up. Does anyone dream of being part of a throuple? That's a couple plus one extra, like a three-way couple. Maybe today young girls or boys do dream of being in a throuple, but my guest today, Rowan Mangan, didn't. Not when she was growing up in Melbourne. Do you know who else didn't dream of being in a throuple? Martha Beck. She's the American author and speaker, life coach and sociologist whose name you might recognise from her self-help books and all the times that she's been on Oprah. Martha is in her early 60s, and before she met Rowan, she'd been with her partner Karen for several decades, ever since she ended her marriage to the father of her 3 children after they both came out as gay. Are you still following? Keep up. So to recap where we are so far in this story, Martha is kind of famous, and Rowan meets her when she pays to go on this annual spiritual retreat that Martha does every year or two. Nothing happens on the retreat, but they meet. And in the months afterwards, Rowan is introduced to Martha's partner, Karen. And look, that is where the plot twists for everyone involved in this story, who all thought their lives were going along in a fairly predictable manner. That's when the universe said, look, best you don't get too comfortable because I'm going to mess with you big time. And I know you have lots of questions. It's understandable. I did too. Because also did I mention that Rowan is in her early 40s and Martha, who you'll hear Rowan refer to as Marty, that's what everybody who knows her calls her, Marty and Karen are in their early 60s. Also living with them in their family home is Adam, Martha's second adult child. He is 34 years old and he has Down syndrome. Plus Lila, the little girl Rowan gave birth to a couple of years ago. So back to your questions. Yes, we will get to all of them, but what you need to understand going in is that this really is not a story that is salacious or weird or sensationalist at all. At its heart, and there is so much heart in this story, just you wait, it is all heart. At its heart, it's a story about love, like so many no-filter stories ultimately are, and this is one of my favourites. And to be honest, as you're about to hear, the idea of having 2 wives is actually pretty compelling. And I challenge anyone to think otherwise after you hear Rowan talk about what it's like when 3 women are raising a baby and running a household together. Rowan is a podcaster, a writer, and she also works with other authors as a kind of coach. What she also is a hoot. We laughed a lot during this conversation, and I'll meet you back here afterwards for a debrief. For your listening pleasure, this is No Filter with Rowan Mangan talking about throuple life and the very strange way this whole thing kicked off in Paris. So you went over to do this course. What was the course about and where did bed bugs come into it?
Oh my God. Oh man. So I had a very weird adventure that began in Ireland where I went out and rented this house that supposedly is the most westerly house in all of Europe. And I wrote a novel. And at the end of that, I had a really bad flare-up of chronic fatigue syndrome. But that didn't stop me from going to Paris, where I encountered in an Airbnb some really serious bed bugs, which it turns out I'm allergic to their bites. And all through this time, I'd had this end goal in sight. At the end of this adventure, I was going to South Africa and I was going to be in the presence of Martha Beck. And I was going to show up like a goddamn Zen guru. I would have meditated every day. I was just going to be so amazing, basically levitating. The wild animals would run up to me because my energy would be so amazing,
Yeah.
And there was this moment in this Paris apartment where I had chronic fatigue. I couldn't stand up, but if I lay down,
you'd get more bed bugs.
Get more bites. I couldn't wear any clothes because my skin was breaking out so allergically. So I'm in this apartment just going, how is this my life? I can't sit, I can't stand, I can't lie. And so anyway, about 48 hours later, I got mugged in Cape Town.
Stop it.
By 5 guys. I arrived on the deck in South Africa like this husk of a human being, just like shaking.
I've heard Martha describe meeting you for the first time and hearing about this person who was arriving at the retreat and getting the updates. She's got bed bugs in Paris. She's been mugged in South Africa. She's going to arrive to us as a broken husk. And yet her experience of you when you arrived was that you were completely zen. How did you pull that off? And why were you zen?
Okay, Mia. So the important thing for you to know about me in this context is that I am exceptionally good at being a teacher's pet. Like, I have a whole career in like working on those skills. I just pretended. I just pretended.
Because you wanted to be the most enlightened zen person who ever zenned at the retreat. So Martha would notice you and think highly of you.
Yeah, that was the intention.
It's not the way most love stories start, really, with bed bugs and a mugging. But was that actually the start of the love story? Because it wasn't Martha that you fell in love with first. What happened after the retreat?
It's so weird. So one of the things I'd known about Martha, because in all her books, she always incorporates her personal story with the stuff she's trying to teach. And so I was very well aware that she had been with her partner, Karen, for many years, and that was like one of those things that was just like, it was done. That was never going anywhere. So that was very apparent to me. And so when I went to the ranch, it was like, cool, I get to meet Karen, I get to hang out with Martha some more and these other really cool people who were living there. And it was very much not a love story in South Africa at that point. It was like you're cool.
I know you'll take this in the spirit that it's intended as a facetious question, but the ranch, you say a lot of people were living there. It wasn't a sex thing though, was it?
No, it totally was. It was like, oh my God, no. I can't stress to you enough how much it was about horses and life coaches.
Right. So it was like
actually pretty lame.
A commune of artists, essentially.
Yeah, it was like that. Like there was this amazing German woman who kind of knew how to do dressage, and then there was a horse whisperer who was the one I was working with, and then there was this social worker who would just sort of come to work on the ranch, feed horses.
This sounds quite delightful. Tell me a little bit about the point in their lives at which you met Karen and Martha. So you were at this point in your mid-30s, pretty unencumbered. They had been together for a really long time. And before they got together, Martha had been married and had children.
Yeah, so it's a complicated backstory. Marty, had been a Mormon, grew up Mormon, and so she got married very young, had kids very young, like in her early 20s. And so then she sort of had that part of her life, and both Karen and Marty are older than me. She'd had kids, then she got together with Karen, then she and her ex-husband and Karen and her ex-husband's boyfriend had all raised the kids together in a house for a while. So they were already doing like unconventional living.
So interesting. And her eldest son, Adam, has Down syndrome.
Yeah.
And so by the time you met Karen and Marty, they were a long-term couple. Were they married?
No, Karen has always had a very strong thing about not wanting to get married.
And 2 of Marty's children were grown up and moved out of home, and Adam still lived with her and Karen.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so enter Rowan.
Teacher's pet. Hi, g'day, everybody, here I am.
Everyone loves an Aussie.
Yeah, no, they do. They love us. And Marty had been working on a novel, and she asked me to come and do a little book midwife conversation after a few weeks. And then, I don't know, I looked after their dogs when they went on a trip. And then there was sort of this sort of time where I was sort of in and out of there, because there were a couple of different residences. So it wasn't like everyone was in one big share house. It was fairly spread out. And then Karen and I, we used this term preoccupied. Like we'd be like, you know, I was just feeling kind of preoccupied. Do you want to go and sit on the swing? Yeah, okay. Yeah, are you feeling that preoccupation? Yeah. And we didn't explore it because it wasn't ever going to happen. You know what I mean? Like it was so never going to happen it's fascinating that it did happen the way it did, Mia, because it couldn't have any other way. And yet the way that everything fell in the end, even to me now, seems impossible and astonishing. But it did. And so Karen went and had a conversation with Marty. I don't know, I'm having these feelings for Ro. Is this, some sort of familial thing? And Marty just said to her, no, I don't think so. Like, I know you pretty well. And I think this is a bit more than a familial thing. And she talks about it now as very much that she had this like rush of joy of, Ro and Karen are going to get together and I'm going to move into the guest bedroom. So I sort of started spending more time at their house. Oh, and then at this point I was working for Marty's company as well. So then we started having work things that we would do together. I was doing some writing for them. And so then it was sort of like all three of us suddenly being preoccupied, and we'd plan out our days sometimes. I'd come up in the morning and we'd sort of say, what are we going to do? And let's just make sure we have plenty of time where the three of us sit next to each other on the couch, a little bit too close. Let's just make sure that that's always just built into the schedule for the day, right? Because that's a normal thing to do. Everyone does that. So.
It's a normal thing that you do with just mates.
Yeah, colleagues.
We
all want to sit too close to our colleagues on the couch every day.
For several hours every day.
Yeah.
In a little cuddle puddle.
Yeah.
Did you have words or a framework to put around this at this point?
No, I still think we don't exactly. I think we're actually getting closer as time goes by, but it was so strange how it happened, because once we finally started trying to put language to it, we would have these, like we called them family dinners, where everyone living on the ranch would have dinner together a few nights a week. And on this one day, we thought, all right, we'll go down and we should probably say to them, we've been spending more time together and it's just like we're a family. We love each other, just like a family though. It's nothing weird. It's nothing gross. Don't worry. It's just a family. And Marty and I were particularly insistent on this. Family. Yeah. Karen is like a bit of a maverick. Like, she just really doesn't care. She looks like the nicest, sweetest, most normal person in the world. And she just doesn't give a fuck. And so we walk down. Yeah, we're like a family. It's cool. Nothing weird. It's all good. And we go in, and our friend had his phone out and was reading a post on Facebook that had just been posted by a mutual friend that we all knew about how she'd decided to start exploring polyamory.
Oh, wow.
He was reading it out going, oh, my God, this is so, oh, my God, how embarrassing. I can't believe she's talking about this. No. This is so embarrassing. I swear to God, like, we had just walked in the door to this and we're like, family.
We've got your family speech all prepared. Family, it's just a family.
Family, we just care about each other. It's just that sitting on the couch too close kind of thing. So we got reared up on our hind legs to do our little speech about family, being a little bit shaken by the whole polyamory revelation. Oh, and we had friends visiting. Sorry, there were 10 people in the room. Friends were visiting, and Karen shouts, well, I don't know about any of that. I just know that I love Marty and I love Ro, and I'm going to get Thai food. And she walks out the door. The ranch is 45 minutes from a bottle of milk. She was gone. And there was dust. And Marty and I are there with our sort of honestly, the most awkward silence ever of my life.
That's a mic drop and a half.
Yeah, we still haven't really forgiven her for that, but it was good.
Didn't someone also shout, or did I imagine this? Nothing's happened. Because that seems like an important point to make.
Oh, my God. It was always that kept being the subtext.
It's the subtext of every conversation, right? Nothing.
Yeah,
it's like,
nothing's happened.
What?
Yeah, nothing's happened. Are you serious? Nothing's happened. What? I mean, obviously there's couch sitting. We have to work together. So sometimes the best place to do that is just lying on the bed. I mean, that's just obvious.
But nothing's happened. No. Just to be clear, and we will let you know when and if something does happen, but nothing's happened.
And then at a certain point, we were like, why would we let them know?
Exactly.
When do people do that?
Just to update you all.
Guys, last night.
It's so funny because when you look from the outside, you would think that it would seem like quite a dramatic, impactful, like the decision, right, to be together, the three of you. For Marty and Karen, essentially, much bigger decision for them to open up their relationship to a third party. But the way you describe it, it was just a slow dawning realization, like just a state of being. Fall in love, I guess.
Yeah, totally. And somewhere in that time, and remember, we were really, really a long way out of society and out of culture. Like we really were at the end of a really long road, quite literally no one drove past us in this canyon among friends. And so we didn't have to, like date or anything like that. So we didn't have to name it for a long time. It was like a gravitational force that all three of us, it was undeniable what was happening. Like it was so undeniable and so apparent. And I don't think it felt like opening something closed to Karen and Marty. I can't speak for them, but it was just more like this has to be. This is not something that cannot be. Because believe me, if we could have not done it, we would have, especially
Why?
Marty and me, because we're just like, we don't want to be those weirdos. If I could avoid being that weirdo, I gladly would. But basically at this point, it's like be a complete weirdo to society and live the happiest life I can imagine. Or the opposite, which starts to seem kind of stupid.
How good is this conversation? Up next, I ask Rowan how it all works. I want to know about logistics. A relationship that includes three people has got to be pretty complicated, right? Stay with us. I want to ask about logistics and not sexual ones. I want to ask about communication and jealousy and arguing. Because three is a complicated number in every aspect. And any woman who's been in a friendship of threes, a close friendship, it rarely ends well. It's very complicated. How have you navigated that dynamic?
I can imagine that if all three of us had come together separately, it would have been quite a different thing. But those two were so established, and they were so established, as well as being partners for all that time. They were really old friends. They knew each other really, really well. So I could come in and be a complete insecure wreck the way that I think we often are early in relationships. And they would like mindlessly call each other just for like, do you need anything at the shops? And I'd be like, can you just call me? Just because then we get into a thing where we do that. And we do things like, let's set up a text thread with the three of us so that we're all
What's called, Rowan?
in.
What's the text thread called?
Wives. How do you know that? How did you know to ask that? That's creepy. It's called Wives.
I'm just so interested about the dynamic because like you said that you fell in love with Karen first, basically, and then you fell in love with Marty and they were already in love. And it's so strange. I've been thinking about this so much in the lead up to our conversation that we never question other types of love, like that you can love two children equally or two parents equally or two friends equally. But this idea that you can't love two people romantically equally or at the same time, that still is something that as a culture we really struggle with.
Yeah. When it came into full focus for me, exactly what we were doing was when our daughter was born. Suddenly I understood that when our culture looks at relationships with more than two people in them, they see like a perversion or a distortion of a kind of couple in a nuclear family. And what I see now as we struggle to raise this very spirited, very active child is, oh my God, this isolated nuclear family is a distortion of what a community is supposed to be. So we're behind our fences in our little, and disproportionately women are completely screwed trying to have a career, have a kid, it's not a joke. And there's like that joke of, oh, I need a wife. And then I'm like, oh, you need two wives. But it's actually not a joke. It's like a cry for help really deeply, and this family structure idea seems to be in crisis to me for us right now in society. The stuff about the mental load. I mean, yeah, it's getting a little bit better, but it's not that much better. And I don't think parents are okay in these isolated pods that we call normal families.
Particularly when so much of the caregiving responsibility defaults to the woman, and if she's got a male partner or no partner and she's isolated, she's probably not living close to, let's be honest, other women, like her mother, or if she has sisters or mother-in-laws. I'm so envious of your experience of having a baby that has three mothers and that you have two wives.
Yeah, and it feels like the bare minimum on most days, I'm telling you. There's a sociologist, I think, called Ali Hochschild, and she did like one of the early studies in the 80s about this sort of first wave of working mothers coming out. And she said something like, these women talk about sleep the way a starving person talks about food. And I just think, oh my God, this is such a cruelty, the way that we're structuring life in this culture right now.
I want to rewind a little bit about the part where you had the baby.
Oh, it was an accident.
Yeah, exactly. Whoops, I just accidentally got pictures of surprise. Yeah. So something we haven't really touched on is the age gap between Karen and Marty and you. So they're in their late 60s, early 70s?
Karen's in her mid-60s. Marty's in her early 60s, yeah.
Early 60s, okay. So they are literally of a different generation to you.
Yeah.
Karen hadn't had any biological children, but she and Marty
she'd raised
Marty's children, yeah. But they were in a different phase of their life. Was having a child something you always knew you wanted to do?
Yeah, and you really know that you're in a good relationship when people who didn't think there were going to be any more babies and nappy changes and stuff are like, absolutely, of course. If that's the dream, then it's our dream. We're on. Let's do it.
Right. So obviously you sorted some sperm, you got pregnant. That can't have been easy. IVF, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
What did you discuss about it before your daughter was born in terms of roles, ways of parenting? Because it was very much in the rearview mirror for them, but it was brand new first-time experience for you.
Yeah, it's a good question. And of course I was like, you're always a bit naive, right, about what you're getting into. But I was always very clear that with Marty, because she does so much of the work, she does so much for our household in terms of the work that she does, and because she's
in terms of breadwinning,
and she did the hard yards with 3 kids, before Karen came along. She had all 3 of them and it was really tough. And so I was quite adamant that neither of them were getting up in the night. That was a really clear one for me, and that's been almost a constant. I thought I could do without Karen more than I can. I sort of wasn't as clear with her as
What do you mean?
Out. I just need more support than I thought I would.
You mean physical, emotional, logistical?
Yeah, mostly physical, logistical. Yeah. I mean, Karen's a tank. She's a morning person. God, love her. She's up, she's around, she's moving fast. She's like
getting shit done.
She's getting shit done. She's always getting shit done for our family, and we would completely crumble without her. It's sort of interesting, right? So if you look at it in terms of, I'm the biological mum, work full time. I have a 3.5-year-old with special needs, and I have one female partner who is working really hard at a very high level to make money for our family. And I have one female partner who's working really hard to support me and our household and do grocery shopping and do pickups and do runs to the doctor when I can't make it and all of this. And I'm like, we're just coping. How are women doing this on their own?
I was going to say it sounds like the dream, but it's reassuring in a way to know that you can never have enough women to help.
You can't. No, it's so true.
And on that point, knowing that this could happen once, does it daunt any of you or give you pause that it could happen again? the kismet of Rowan coming in and everyone becoming preoccupied could happen again. Have you thought about that?
No, we talk about it all the time. We've got Kate Blanchett on the list. Karen's very, very clear on that, and Gina from Alone Australia.
You know what I mean? Like they had in their minds, right, we're locked and loaded. Oh, wait, this life is not as locked and loaded as we thought. Is that an exciting possibility to live with? Or you talked about your insecurity before. Is it one that makes you think, oh, maybe they'll get sick of me, maybe I'll get sick of them, maybe this person that we're doing an interview with, Marty might become preoccupied with her, maybe Karen. Like, does it make the ground feel unsteady underneath your feet?
This has never crossed my mind. That is so interesting. I think it felt so 1,000,000,000 to 1 when it happened and so out of character for all of us. None of us identifies as anything other than monogamous. We're just a little monogamous clump. You know what I mean? Like some people really feel like polyamory is their identity. I'm not sure if it's like a sexual identity or it's a broader identity, but that's not exactly how we feel. It just happened to fall this way for us.
So it's like the door was closed behind you.
Yeah, I mean,
I know that's very literal.
Yeah, not officially. I genuinely, you're asking that question, I'm like, I should have thought of that.
Yeah, wow. But you said you were insecure. What were you insecure about? And of course I would be too. But the fact that they had so much history, so much shared in-jokes, references, stories, all of that. And you were like, hi, I'm Rowan. I've been here for 5 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. And they're like, oh, remember Bob? Oh, yeah.
Like,
all of that sort of stuff.
I wasn't born when you were talking about this particular story. Yeah. Do you ever throw that in their face a little bit? Sorry, I was only 2. Don't remember that song.
Yeah. No, I do. I was insecure, but it was very much about their connection with each other.
Yes, exactly.
And just how could I ever kind of break into, there's a voice that couples do with each other after a certain point that has no inflection. It's just like the complete, did you get milk?
Oh my God, that's so true.
Yeah, totally did. And they had that with each other and they didn't have it with me. With me, I'd walk into the room and they'd be like, hey.
Hi.
And I'm like, can't you just ignore me and then ask me if I got milk? Like,
so you wanted to skip to the part where they were sort of taking you for granted a little bit and you weren't such a novelty because that was true intimacy to you.
I wanted it all to be equal. But what we've found over time is that it's not equality. It's like we're all bringing something completely complementary in because Marty and I work together so much and how we work together is so different and how Karen and I parent together. We do the bulk of the parenting together. And so and not that it's all about work. We also have really unique relationships with each other.
That are one-on-one.
Yeah.
Do you have like one-on-one time? Like, will there be a time when you're like consciously, I've been spending heaps of time with Karen. I haven't really had a conversation properly with Marty or vice versa?
We used to. I used to do a lot more, like Karen and I would have a lot of date nights and stuff because Marty and I were working together and we're very, very conscientious about doing communing time, the 3 of us. And that feels really super important.
When do you do that? Oh, cuddles on the couch.
Periodically throughout the day. There's morning communion. If possible, we squeak in a little communion middle of the day.
When you say communion, explain what you mean.
We commune. Like we sit and we talk about whatever, like we check in with each other. There's this rhythm to our days and our relationship that I actually can't help feeling like community, right? Like these rhythms of interaction, these sort of rituals that we build into our lives are sort of how we're supposed to be with the people around us. I mean that in a broader sort of way. That's the meaning of life, right? To hang out with your besties. So that's what we try to do. We have Trinity time every night before we all go off to our separate bedrooms that we created during COVID. That is the best thing. And I feel like that's a greater taboo.
Because, 3 people in a bed, I'm sorry.
That was
too many
never,
people. And then when a baby's coming in, oh my God.
What the heck does the person in the middle do? You have got no bedside table. I used to imagine, could I put something above where I could just have my water bottle, and
that's very much the short straw being in the middle, I would imagine.
Yeah. It's not all. It's
So you decided to
made
have
up.
separate bedrooms. Smart. So then your communion time is like in communal areas, but then you've all got separate identities as well as your identity as a threesome, but then your identity as couples too.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes it sound like maths, but go maths.
No. Yeah. It's actually harder to describe than I thought. Yeah. Go on.
Marty, hey, what are you guys doing tonight? Oh, we're going on date night. Oh, can I come? No, it's date night, Marty. Like,
Marty, we're going on date night. Marty, does that mean I can paint and have some solitude? Are you serious? Oh my God, best night ever.
so
Please don't rush
true.
home.
I hadn't thought about it like that. But that has to come from a place of security, obviously.
Yeah.
And how do you feel when they go on date night or they don't go on date night?
They don't go on date night.
Well, they had 30 years to get all that.
Yeah. They're like, no, it's fine.
But I mean, with any group of three, there will always be times when someone is shitting you, right?
Mm.
What happens when the same person is shitting two of you?
All right. So this is how it's done in our family. I will come up to Karen and I will say, I know this isn't reasonable. You know, the pressure is building up and I just need to vent and I don't mean anything bad by it. But Marty is driving me fucking crazy because she did this and she did this and she did this. And Karen goes, oh, yeah, I know how that is. And then I'm like, cool, thanks. Catch you later. That's it, because it's actually the safest space to bitch, because on the one hand, it's completely understood that this is someone that you love. And on the other hand, it's completely understood that every one of us is as annoying as all get out, especially when you live, work, parent together.
So when would that go bad? Like if Karen went, yeah, I hate it when she does that, and that. And you go, yeah. At what point would you be betraying Marty or whoever it was, you know?
I think it can't turn toxic because there's a kind of container of love and respect that it happens inside of. And then because we're always recalibrating with these communion sessions, we recalibrate our energy. And so it can't get sort of cliquey or factional or whatever.
The fact that Karen just goes, oh, I know what that's like. That's all you need to hear.
Yeah.
But if you'd have gone and said that to Marty or whoever, like, Marty, you blah, 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 she would have gone, no, but you're blah, 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 and I'm not. And then that's a fight.
Yeah.
Because sometimes all you need, you're right, all you need is for someone to just go, oh, that's so annoying.
Yeah. And I know exactly because I also
you feel
live with that
seen
person
and
and
heard,
love
right?
that person.
Correct.
Yeah.
The term compersion.
Yeah.
What is it? Because it feels like it's the key to unlocking this whole caper.
Yeah, it is. And it's so interesting because we only learned that. Like, it was like we got together and then we're like, shit, we better figure out what we're doing. So we started like trying to read about polyamory and we were all just like, all right.
That's what we
Sure.
are. That's the preoccupation.
But that term is a massive one for us. So poly people talk about compersion as the feeling of love and joy that you get when you see your two partners loving on each other, more or less, I think. And it is so true. It's so true. I mean, it's got to be similar to, like you were talking about having more than one kid. Like if you see your two kids being adorable together, I think it must be similar to that. You know, if you take sort of sexual stuff out of it and any sense of ownership or whatever, which we don't really do anyway, it's just gorgeous when there's love around.
I know what that feels like with my children now that they're older and they have their own partners. Watching them be loved by their own partners is like, I don't know if compersion only applies to people you're in a romantic relationship with, but that idea of watching someone you love be loved by someone else lifts your soul in such a way that was actually helpful for me to understand the flip side of the jealousy that everyone straight away asks you about in a throuple situation, because everyone can only see the jealousy. But the compersion is that word that reflected love and joy.
And it's like this person can be loved without me needing to center myself in that. Like I can be taking a nap and that person can be loved and cared for. I can be looking after myself. I can go under a bus and that person will be loved and cared for. The person I love will not, you know, like there's something so liberating about that feeling as well.
Wow, it's the opposite of dependence, isn't it? Sounds very freeing.
Yeah, it totally is. Yeah, it's kind of awesome.
How has the baby changed dynamics in terms of the roles of everybody in the house? And where does Adam fit into all this? Because Adam still lives there.
He's like a vital part of our
What's
sort
his
of
role?
weird-ass family. His role is the big brother. He is a total narc when it comes to Lila. He's always watching her and going, now what's she up to? And like not letting her get away with anything. But they're always like, you'll look over and if they think you're not watching, he'll always be like tickling her feet or something. Like it's an incredibly sweet relationship. And because with Down syndrome, routine is super, super, super important. So Adam really holds us in our rituals, in our family rituals that feel like the real backbone of how we function. And remember, like, we're all working from home and we're all hermits. So
deep introverts. How did Adam deal with you coming into the family?
It's so weird. Like all three of Marty and Karen's kids are so freaking cool. Like if you can imagine the odds of us coming together and making it work, imagine the odds then of having the people closest, most affected like by a weird new family dynamic being like, this is awesome. When we first got together, Adam was walking around beaming for weeks. He started singing in his room more often. He always likes to sort of sing on a Sunday afternoon. That tends to be his singing time, and he puts on his headphones and he like gets out the High School Musical soundtrack and Glee and stuff and just goes for it. He started doing that almost every day. He loved it. He was so happy.
What about parents? What about each of your parents?
Well, with the generation thing, it's not such an issue with their parents. Karen's mother died a year ago, and before that she was just the absolute sweetest, kindest, like little old Danish lady. Karen goes down to Florida to tell her, Mom, Marty and I have a new partner. Just because Karen doesn't care. Karen don't give a shit. And her mother's just like listens to this whole story and then just says, oh, your father and I never felt the need for that. And Karen's like, oh, cool. All right. But my parents have been amazing. Absolutely amazing. Like my mum, she's just finished reading this book by Anna Funder about George Orwell's wife. And she like rang me a couple of days ago and she's just like, oh, I'm so glad you're not with a man. Oh, God, I'm just so relieved. So she's like, yeah.
It's a hectic book, that book.
I'm looking forward to reading it, yeah.
Was this your first relationship with women?
My first long-term relationship, yeah. I'd been with guys before mostly.
People like to have categorizations. How do you classify yourself? I know that when you spoke to Glennon and Abby, it's that idea of, you mentioned monogamous, but also queer, and the fact that identifying as queer already makes you to a degree, or certainly in the case of Karen and Marty and their generation, a bit outside the culture, a bit countercultural. And so this is sort of just an extension of that. But for you, you've gone to a high degree of difficulty of being outside the culture in one step. Has it made a difference that you sort of were a bit fluid prior, like that your mind was open?
Yeah, oh, definitely. I was never very concerned about gay or straight. I mean, I was lucky. I grew up in inner Melbourne. Like it was never a huge deal. And so I remember like kind of shamefacedly at one point coming in to my parents going, I think I like boys. Sorry to be like
You're such
totally
disappointment
boring.
to us.
Anyway.
We're not angry. We're just disappointed.
We're just disappointed. Anyway, in the end, thank God it was just a phase. But, you know, in a weird way, it has been the fuel for kind of a new worldview. And like the work we do increasingly is kind of powered by the fact that we know for sure that even if every day you have to feel uncomfortable describing your family, figuring out how to fill out the preschool forms or at the doctor, like what's, you know.
What do you do? I didn't even think of that. And no birth certificate.
Birth certificate's Marty because we're legally married. Don't even get me started on America though, because Marty also had to adopt her because in some states, if I went under a bus, this anonymous sperm donor would be her father, even though Marty's on the birth certificate.
But all that's paperwork, right? Like all that's paperwork stuff.
It is, yeah. Yeah, and it's just to be on the safe side. But so the birth certificate was fine. That was straightforward. But yeah, it's always
the descriptions.
I didn't. People.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, so who's her dad? I'm like, well, how long have you got?
Yeah. Even with us, it's like, which one's the man? It's like, depends on the day. We share it around.
I guess there's 3 countercultural things that you're doing because you're such a high achiever and a teacher's pet.
Thanks, mate.
It's same-sex relationship, throuple, and also 2 women who are the generation older than you.
Yeah.
Which of those 3 things does society have the biggest problem with in your experience?
Society has the biggest problem with 3 people. I have the biggest problem with the age gap.
Why?
I feel like it's harder to explain, but I've always had older partners, and so I don't know, but I always feel like da-da-da, my partner, and then they show up and they're like, is that your partner or your mum?
Yeah.
You know, that thing? That one's harder for me. But the 3 people, for sure, like that's a no-brainer.
Well, that was a lot to unpack, wasn't it? And it was all glorious. I so enjoyed that conversation. Rowan just made me laugh when I said to her, how did you get pregnant? And she said it was by accident. That was funny. I think she's just a hoot. And I just think that the whole situation sounds so, I'm going to say so healthy and so wonderful and warm and supportive and kind of ideal. Like, it just seems to make so much sense. I thought that interview would be a lot longer because I thought I'd have a lot more questions, but it all just seems so natural and normal when Rowan talks about it. And it's just a further reminder that families come in so many different shapes and sizes and configurations. And at the heart of it, the important thing is love, that the love is there. And if you're wondering about why I didn't ask a very direct question about sex stuff, when I was talking to Rowan about doing this interview, and I always rely on people to trust me and to come on this podcast and talk about some really personal things and make themselves really vulnerable. I always want to make them understand that I'm going in with good faith. And the sex question just feels really reductive. It feels really intrusive. It feels really personal. And I think that, you know, I have no filter, but even I can see when something could just be taken out of context by perhaps, I don't know, the Daily Mail and turned into a story that made them look like sex weirdos. That was Rowan's description. She said, I just don't want us to come across as sex weirdos. They're not sex weirdos. They're just lovely, beautiful women who are in love with each other and in a relationship with each other. And we're all more than our sex lives, aren't we? Aren't we? So there you go. There's nothing weird about it. They're just a family of a different shape. Family. It's family. It's all about family. If you want to hear more from Rowan, and my goodness, why wouldn't you? She actually co-hosts a podcast. You heard her talking about it in the episode. It's called Bewildered, but when I say that, you think, oh, it's bewildered. They're bewildered. It's her and Martha, but it's actually bewildered. The word wild, but anyway, you'll understand if you go and find it. We'll put a link in the show notes. We'll also put a link to Rowan's Instagram, and I'm just besotted with this very interesting, excellent family. If you've got an interesting family or an interesting story, if there's someone that you've come across that you think I should interview, we'll put a link in the show notes and you can make any suggestions or feedback that you have about the show right there. This episode of No Filter was produced by Kimberly Bradish and GM Moylan with sound production by Leah Porges. I'm Mia Freedman, and it's been a hoot to be in your ears with Rowan today. I will see you next week.